Mark, thanks. Between 6 to 33% of people who have experienced significant trauma will develop acute stress disorder. Research shows that if ASD is not addressed, over 80% will develop post-traumatic stress disorder. Dr. Tim Perry with Frontier Health is with us today to talk a little bit more about acute stress disorder in response to the disaster that our region is experiencing. Thanks so much for joining us.
Absolutely.
Well, first off, what is acute stress disorder and how is it different than PTSD?
Well, they're very similar, actually. Acute stress disorder is associated with a traumatic experience, and the symptoms are similar. The difference is the severity, the duration, and the onset. Usually acute stress disorder starts between 3 or 4 days after an event, or within about 3 weeks after an event. Longer than that, it may be developing into post-traumatic stress disorder. It's very acute, usually short duration if it is addressed early. If not, it can continue on and develop into full-blown post-traumatic stress disorder.
So how do people know that they're struggling with it?
Well, there are certain symptoms that you need to look for, the same kind of things you'd look for in post-traumatic stress. The distressing memories of the traumatic experience, often similar to a flashback, maybe not as intense as a flashback, but very distressing memories. Those memories trigger physiological and psychological responses. You may start feeling your heart rate go up, perspiration go up, stomach tightening, those kinds of things. Strong avoidance of anything that would trigger a memory. If you start having those kinds of symptoms, it may trigger things like nightmares or daymares that bring you distress in the daytime or at night. Having a difficult time seeing anything in a positive light, a sense of hopelessness about the future, those kinds of things. If you start having that and intense stress around this, continuing on for weeks at a time, you need to get it checked out.
And let's talk about how this can relate to what folks are experiencing right now and after what they have gone through with the flooding.
Well, you know, anytime we have a traumatic experience, and a natural disaster like this is a traumatic experience, and there's variations of levels of trauma. There is direct trauma from people that actually were impacted directly by it, that had the most loss, the most threat to life. There's indirect or collective trauma like the community would experience. The whole community is traumatized. And then there is secondary or vicarious trauma that people like first responders and volunteers and people that were in the rescue process and reporters that were going out seeing the damage and those kinds of things, they can experience that trauma. Anytime there is trauma, there's stress related to it. It's normal stress initially, but if that trauma is so significant or lasts for a certain duration, that stress level continues to rise to the point it becomes distress. When it reaches distress, then it's actually affecting you mentally and physically. That's when it becomes a problem that needs to be addressed.
And speaking of that, what can people do to manage it, and how do they know that it's time to go ahead and address it?
Well, first off, if you're having that stress and it's continuing on for days and weeks at a time, and it's not going away, and it's beginning to affect your ability to function, care for yourself, care for others, do the things you need to do, it's something you really need to look into. There are things you can do to mitigate it, and at the top of that list is self-care. Often when we're distressed, the very first thing we sacrifice is care for ourselves. We're looking at the overwhelming things we need to accomplish or the needs of others and don't notice what's happening to ourselves. Our body is reaching a maximum point of extending itself in the stress it's under to try to produce the energy to deal with that stress. If we don't take care of it, it will eventually have a negative effect, and we could actually collapse or have something more serious with our body taking effect with that. Another important one is patience. That's very hard when you're in the stress situation, is to have patience. This has been something that's come on that's going to take a while to overcome and take a while to rebuild and to recover from. And we need to recognize that's going to be something that we take in moderate steps, not even a day at a time, but sometimes just an hour at a time is our best way to overcome that. And surround yourself with supportive people. People that care about you and love you, that can be there to uplift you. Those are strong things to help you overcome acute stress.
Especially during this time. Well, Dr. Perry, thank you so much. As always, great advice and great tips for us. For more information about acute stress disorder, you can contact Frontier Health. That email and phone number are right there on your screen.